what's up you guys? It's Jaded. So for this episode of Farmin Friday, I wanted to go back to Diablo 3 talking about the expansion that got announced. It didn't really get announced, there's no details on it, it just got talked about that it is in the works, and they do have plans to do expansions for this game. So I thought it'd be fun just to go into the realm of what an expansion would look like, what type of stuff would that have in it, you know, what would that entail. And before we get into any story elements or new gameplay, new areas, new customization, I want to talk about probably the biggest thing that's kind of a no-brainer when it comes to these expansions, and that is a new class, having a new character class to play, to pick up, to learn. And since by the time we get an expansion, I guarantee PvP will be out. It'll kind of spice up that scene as well. So when we get into coming up with a new class, you have to look at what we already have, what sort of gaps do we have in the characters. So obviously we have 2 int classes, 2 dex classes, and 1 strength class. So it's probably going to be a strength class, just to balance things out, especially on the auction house. You know, you got to have different classes pulling in different loot. Even though the majority of strength gear is really expensive because Barb is so popular right now. I mean, even if you can go look at ice climbers, and similar stat ice climbers with movement speed for dex is 1/3 the price. It's pretty ridiculous, but you know, there has to be a balance there in the stats. So most likely we're gonna have a strength class. I don't imagine there might be 2 classes, but you know, you can really just bank on at least 1. So the other thing you have to look at is we have 3 range classes and we have 2 melee. So obviously there's a need for another melee, especially since Barb has, you know, great ranged abilities as well. So yeah, it's probably going to be melee, it's probably going to be strength based, and from that then you can go into what's been in previous Diablo games, and also what's something new and fresh, because I don't think that the team wants to pull old characters back. You know, they want it to be something new and exciting. You know, with the Demon Hunter, it wasn't an Amazon, and it sort of had its own identity. A lot of people kind of get upset at that. They're like, dude, just put the Amazon back in. I want my Necromancer. I want my Paladin. Necromancer and Paladin are probably the biggest 2 that people keep keep bringing up. But I just don't see it happening. However, if you look at the Druid, I think the Druid actually makes a really good fit with the current lineup. Because there's nothing really in the game, I guess, apart from Archon or Wrath of the Berserker, that really you're transforming, shape-shifting, I think is an area they can explore. And of course Druid fits that, and it could be a strength class. You know, of course he uses spells and stuff, but they could just base all that off of being a strength class, being this super powerful, aggressive, werewolf-looking dude. We do already have a summoning class. You know, we have the Witch Doctor, so Necromancer, it's kind of hard to fit in there. I know that people want their 30 skeleton army back, but I just don't see that happening, especially with PvP. I don't know, that would fill the screen so much that it kind of creates a lot of chaos, and that's something they wanted to avoid. They wanted to kind of streamline it a bit more, so I just don't see it. But look, if you look at the Druid, I think the Druid would fit. You know, it could be shapeshift for a limited time, or it could be permanent shapeshifting. I think it'd be really interesting to do something where you shapeshift into a creature and you have 5 seconds or maybe less of new skills or something to use within that, and then you shapeshift back. And you could kind of have a combo system or some interesting resource system that they haven't explored yet. And I think some type of combo resource system is a definite area that would work. I remember some of the first, the early Fury screenshots and gameplay that we saw. It had the Fury orb, but it had 3 buttons on top of it. They weren't really buttons. It would just fill up. Once the orb filled up, then one of those buttons, or the lights, I guess you could call them, would light up, and then you could use that to spend on combos. And then, you know, you had 3 of these lights that would light up, but you could spend something for all 3 of them, or you could just spend something for 2 or 1. Something like that could be really interesting. But shifting from the druid, no pun intended, I think another big area is definitely sword and board. You know, shield being a big one. For me especially, I love shields. I just absolutely love the aesthetic of them. I think they're not represented well in the game currently. And so having some sort of strength melee knight class, whether it's bringing back the paladin, which again, I don't know if they're up for that. I think they're gonna explore a new class. And someone on Reddit, I believe, had brought up the Blood Knight. I thought this was an interesting area to go. I don't know anything about it. I haven't even looked up anything about it, but it just sounded really interesting. And if not that, then some sort of like demonic knight, something like a Dark Knight, you know? Not Batman, I know what you're thinking, not Batman, but like a Dark Knight where the shield's armor value increases your damage or something along those lines. You know, you have shield abilities like a stun, a smite, you know, any type of magical effects you could put on a shield would look really badass. And instead of being like the Holy Paladin, you could be this more evilly dark character. But something like that, you know, blood magic isn't really explored in the game. I think there's space for it for sure. We have everything like arcane, we have, you know, frost and fire, shadow type of magic, you know, voodoo and all that. So something like blood magic would be really cool on this new character. But as long as it's like a proper tank sort of class, I'm all for it. That's definitely something I'd be really interested in. But yeah, those are the two classes that I think that Blizzard will go one or the other, some type of shapeshifter or some type of knight class. Now moving away from a new class, we're looking at, you know, I don't want to get too much into the story because I'm not a big story guy, and Diablo 3 story, I mean, it's been pretty poor, to say the least. But, you know, I don't get into the lore too much. Video games never really just do it for me, you know? There are very few video games that evoke, like, proper emotion and really have, like, the performances done behind them well. And it's mostly because of the lack of, like, facial emotion, you know? That the nuances of the face really do it when it comes to feeling for someone. So I always feel like story's not the best, unless it's like over the top action-y. Then it's done usually a lot easier. So story aside, I feel like you know, when they come out with this new expansion, it needs as much content as the original game has, but it needs to be much more open. You know, you need to be able to go from act to act. If they do like a whole 4-act thing, then you know, you need that seamless transition between acts where you can port wherever you want. There are a lot of little tiny features like that I feel like are missing with the main storyline. You know, being able to bypass all story elements while you're farming it out. Having proper events that are actually worth doing and like exciting when you come across them because of how rewarding they are. Just having a lot more enemies on screen to fight. You know, being swamped by mobs is like, it feels so good when you're just crushing all these things around you. And you don't get that feeling very much. Even in Act 3, where there's just tons of mobs, you have things like the Fallen, where you know, you hit a mob and then a bunch of the Fallen just run away. You don't feel swamped by all these mobs. And you know, with a whole new area, all these new acts, or maybe it's just one giant act, like it was in D2 where they had Act 5. Really whatever they decide to do with it, I hope that they kind of eliminate the need to go back to the old story and farm that area. I hope with this new area they just do it right, they do it proper. You know, the whole switching between acts thing, bypassing any story elements, you know, just proper farming areas, proper areas to go and just slay hordes and hordes of monsters. And it's really a chance for them to do that stuff properly by just starting new with this expansion. Now, apart from that side of the gameplay, we get into like customization and things like that. I feel like customization in this game is so lacking. You know, anything from the amount of drops or the type of drops that we pick up into things like the crafters not being good. I think crafting, at least the NPCs themselves, could be a lot more useful and more interesting. You know, we could get things like item enchantments and the customization could go way deeper. We could get things like rune words. You know, I talked about items before in a video recently, but really the customization in this game is so limited, and I feel like the Paragon system could be a lot more fleshed out. There could be a lot more purpose to getting high Paragon. We're gonna have to see how PvP plays out. You know, that will obviously come before this patch, but there's gonna be a lot of customization things with PvP, I feel. You know, we haven't seen the full extent of it, but we know there's like PvP tokens, and so there's gonna probably be like visual stuff to buy. But we need a lot more customization in this game, period. And then, you know, some of the last stuff I would like to see with an expansion is public games maybe revamped. With Heart of the Swarm, they're sort of revamping the UI and all of that. They're adding in a lot more UI features, and with Diablo I don't necessarily feel that we need a lot of UI things, more than we just need like the infrastructure for public games to be changed. We need, you know, clans and guild systems and proper chat rooms and all that good stuff that everyone's always talked about. All that stuff could be overhauled for like an expansion. You know, obviously you want that stuff to come sooner, but if it comes in an expansion, you know, I'm all for it. And then the last thing I want to talk about really quick is just boss fights. I think boss fights were really underwhelming for a lot of people. Belial was actually pretty cool. I actually like that encounter a lot, how the scenery breaks away and he sort of transforms into this giant boss. I think that's really badass, but I don't feel like other bosses really live up to anything interesting other than going in and just face tanking it, or avoiding a few like small mechanics here and there. I mean, if you take a look at the Uber bosses that just came out, I mean, just look at Cool and how annoying that is. Like the bubble spamming, where he just sits in a bubble and you can't do anything if you're melee. Like stuff like that is just really irritating, and I feel like bosses in this game could just be done infinitely better. I mean, even the first time you go into like a Uber boss portal, there's like this really like pointless camera motion where it just zooms over to them and they're just standing there. There's no presentation, there's nothing exciting about it. It's just camera moves over to what you're fighting and then it fades back into you. Like, I don't know, stuff like that isn't really Blizzard material in my eyes. I feel like that stuff isn't done as well as it could be. And because of all that stuff, bosses just feel really underwhelming. I mean, even the Butcher has actually some pretty cool mechanics. You know, the first time I saw the Butcher fight, I was pumped up for like seeing the rest of the bosses in the game, because it's actually pretty well done, but there's just no reason to go and fight those bosses again. But yeah, let me know what you guys want out of an expansion. If I didn't cover something that you really want to see, or if there's a class that you really want to see, if there's like some sort of customization in Diablo that you want to come back. I didn't even talk about like talismans or charms or anything like that, which you can almost count on there being something. But yeah, let me know if I missed something, and thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you guys next time.